really honored to welcome Chris Roberts to the stage.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. How are we doing this afternoon? Good? Having a good DICE? So, we're going to talk about Star Citizen. I mean, the theme of DICE 2015 is Without Borders, and if I was going to think of a project that would typify something that is without borders, I would definitely think Star Citizen would be one of them. So, Star Citizen Without Borders, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Crowd. $72 million. That's a big number, but it's not the whole Star Citizen story by a long way. So Star Citizen represents a radically different approach to development and publishing, and I'd like to think that our success is no fluke. Developers and even publishers, around here I'm sure there's a few in the audience, I think can embrace the way we go about things for surprising or beneficial results. The world's changing, and we decided from the very beginning, it was kind of one of the big inspirations of what I was trying to do with Star Citizen, to approach it in a very different way, in a way that the sort of technology of today and the connection of today allows you to connect with an audience in a very different way. So, it's an interconnected world, shares its preferences, interests, desires at the speed of light. Instant communication can take down dictatorships, turn good ideas into billion-dollar companies, and make house cats celebrities. So the time has come to embrace your audience. The time has come to join the crowd, or at least that's the way I feel. So, one of the aspects that the Without Borders works for us is the funding. Obviously, that's gotten us to where we are. We don't need a publisher's green light. We don't need to give up our IP, and hopefully I'm not compromising my vision. So Kickstarter, Airbnb, Uber, Grubhub all remove the middlemen, allow direct connection between the consumers and the providers. So the thought behind Star Citizen when I was first doing it was, why not go directly to your ultimate audience and help them fund a game they want to play and reward for helping make it a reality. And that was actually true even before we did the crowdfunding. My initial plan was actually to take a sort of Minecraft model, which would be to sort of build an initial prototype and an alpha, and then sort of share it out there at a reduced price and continue to build it as people joined and sort of joined the ranks of the people testing and playing the alpha, and sort of migrated into using crowdfunding as part of that device. So on the start of the campaign, we had a golden ticket site where we basically created a site 30 days before I was announcing the game, and it was literally a site to aggregate a community of people that liked space games, that liked PC games, and liked some of my games, and we had about 10,000 people sign up in the first day, and by the time that we announced the game at GDC Online, now called GDC Next, it's in LA, but it was in Austin at the time, we had about 32,000 members of our community already before we'd even said what the game was. So we started the first day of crowdfunding in October 10th of 2012 in Austin, Texas. And from the very beginning, we've focused on fostering the community and sort of generating contents and engaging them and doing updates while we were going through the initial campaign. And there's a sort of energy that comes with that helps you sort of create excitement and build. And if you look at most crowdfunding campaigns that work well, you can sort of see that as people release content, more and more people join and more money comes in. On the funding Without Borders here, you can actually see in our initial funding, that was from all the various countries around the world that actually came and contributed to Star Citizen. We ended the campaign with a large community of backers from around the globe. We kept focus on engaging and reaching out to prospective players who fund us as they enlist. And instead of focusing on a publisher or a deal, we were really focused on the community and the game we wanted to build and the game they wanted to play. So another aspect that we sort of engage in is the development without borders. There's several aspects to that. First off, we have a different approach to the talent. So we don't focus on bringing talent to us and being in one location and fighting with other studios that are maybe in the same city that we are. We actually go to various different places where the talent is. We have a very distributed development process. Want feedback on your design? Well, in our minds, it's probably a good idea to get feedback of whether something's good, whether people like it, before you ship. And developing the game behind closed doors, in today's world, it sort of feels like that's not what people want. They want to sort of be connected, find out what's happening, see the progress, get excited by it. One card behind. Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Twitch, they're all about letting users share their experiences. So that was one of the concepts as we carried on with Star Citizen, was like, okay, well, why don't we share the development process and not just do updates when we're doing the initial campaign? It's like, why don't we share it as we're doing it along? And because I've made a fair number of games, and generally inside the development team, as you're making stuff, you see these great things and you get excited, but you don't really have the ability to share that with people outside your group, or perhaps within the small sort of confines of your publisher. And there's something really cool in sharing what you're doing, and it's exciting for the team, it's exciting for people that see it. So that was kind of the premise with our sort of open development model. So we allow the backers to see everything. So they can see the good, the bad. We make mistakes and then we correct them. We're always communicating with them. We have a huge amount of transparency, so we're not always perfect, but people sort of feel like they get the straight news from us, whether it's good or bad, it's unadulterated. And the community themselves sort of feel like they're part of the team and feel like they have a say in what happens, because they get to play the game, and they get to, we haven't finished building the game. We've got a lot of stuff still to do, but we share parts of the game as we build it with them, and they give us feedback. We listen to it. It's a very beneficial process. In terms of our development without borders, we had a core group of about a dozen. We started in 2012. As of this year, we have 6 major studios working on the game. 4 of them are in-house and 2 of them are out-of-house. But it's across 6 cities. So we have Los Angeles, which is the headquarters. We have Austin, Texas. We have Manchester, UK, and Frankfurt, Germany are the 4 in-house development studios. And then we have a development partner called Ilphonic that is in Denver, Colorado, and another development partner called Behavior that is in Montreal in Canada. As we grow our development, it also allows our community and our backers to come visit our development locations, and so they can sort of feel engaged and see where we are, see how we build the game. So the team gets excitement from being able to share their work with the fans all the time. The feedback that you get all the time is actually really useful, both for making your work better, but also for giving you sort of an energy for knowing that people care about what you're doing, and the fact that if they're excited, then it's much easier to get up in the morning to keep cranking on that huge spaceship that's going to take you 6 months to build. I mean, game development is not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of love and passion, and when you've got people out there that are really excited by what you're giving them, I think it sort of helps the development team to keep enthusiastic and committed and focused over a fairly long period of time, which is what you need in today's world for doing sort of large-scale games. So there we go. So the next aspect of sort of without borders is communication without borders. And for us, and I think this is probably true with what everyone's sort of seeing in today's media, but press release and a few screenshots, saving up for a few big reveals in some print magazines, or sort of stage managing your audience with an orchestrated sort of marketing and PR campaign 6 months before your release. None of that, I think, works very well in today's sort of connected, 24/7, constant news stream world that is always wanting new information and new data to share with their readers. And for us, I think that, in general, I mean, we can say here, you got things like YouTube and Twitter and Reddit, and these are platforms that people use for sharing their ideas from 140 characters to 4K video, and they're doing it all the time. And so our concept was, well, look, why don't we engage our users with the same variety, the same frequency, the same immediacy that they have come to expect in all these other forms of media? Because I just think the consumption of information and media now is radically different than it, say, used to be 10, 15, 20 years ago. So we do daily updates on our website. We give backers an inside look at the various aspects of the game, the universe, the art, everything as it happens, sort of almost in real time. And so here's the ways that we do it. So we have live chat on our forums where the fans and the community members can interact with the development team. They can ask questions like, how is the physics working on this spaceship? And the physics programmer will actually go and give them an answer. And we do daily development updates. We do twice weekly full fiction sort of storyline shows. So essentially, we're updating sort of the universe, building the universe, the fiction of the universe, via our website before they're actually getting to adventure around and play it. So it's sort of we're describing characters or locations or places and making this world feel tangible to the community. We do detailed monthly reports for the backers from each one of our studios at the end of every month. In fact, the reports that we do on our website are more in-depth than any report I used to do when I was at Origin and we were part of EA, or when I was at Digital Anvil and Microsoft was our partner. So I think that kind of says something. We also have a monthly magazine that covers our sort of overall development. So usually 50 to 70 pages every month. It goes into depth behind how we built a spaceship, or how we designed a mechanic, or the behind-the-scenes goings-on when we put a show together and stuff like that. So on top of that, we do consistent video updates. Oops, hang on a sec. I'm one ahead over here. Consistent video updates, roughly one every 2 days. So I think that's playing. Oops. Sorry, guys. Anyway, there's a video that should be playing there, but maybe I'll do it in the back. Anyway, the consistent video updates, roughly one every 2 days. Hang on. Okay, go forward. Here. Hopefully the video plays. Anyway, I'll let them do that. So consistent video updates, roughly one every 2 days. There we go. Multiple weekly web TV shows, behind-the-scenes focus segments, meet the dev interviews, so that people get to see the face and have, see the interaction with various developers we've got. We do trailers and ship commercials. A few of you may have seen those, where we actually take our game assets and sort of do these futuristic in-fiction commercials that essentially would be like selling this future spaceship in this future world that helps build the fiction, helps our artists actually finish the ship for public viewing in the game. We also do weekly interactive sort of live streams. So after our Around the Verse segment, which is sort of the weekly news show, there's sort of an interactive live stream with the fans afterwards. We also do sort of fan-generated and community, we're going to be focused on doing a fair amount of community content. So the next great Starship was something that we did last year, which was a competition from the audience, the community of Star Citizen, to say, who out there wants to design a spaceship? Who wants to build a spaceship to a high level of quality and have it in the game? And so we ran this as sort of an ongoing competition where we had sort of video update segments and the community voted. And at the end of the day, we had the final, which was at the very beginning of June, and the Redeemer was the winning ship. And now that winning ship is in Star Citizen and is in the hangar, if you happen to have pledged for it or backed for it. So it's really cool. That's the first element of sort of fan-created, a very high-quality asset that's in the game. It was also a great recruiting tool for us. We've actually got a few artists that now work for us that came from the various competitors that were working on the next great Starship. And we are going to be committed to doing more of that, where we're bringing in community content. We actually have a trailer that is sort of the official Star Citizen trailer that was inspired by a fan-made trailer originally. And those are kind of the aspects that we sort of involve the community. And they have an incredible amount of creativity and enthusiasm and ideas, and it's pretty fantastic. So the other thing that we do is we do a lot of live events and direct interaction with the community one-on-one all around the world. So we do office tours for backers, which I mentioned before. We do town halls. So in PAX South, we actually rented out a theater and put on a bunch of panels for the community members that were in San Antonio or had come down to PAX South, and sort of went over various aspects of the persistent universe, which is our sort of big open sandbox part of Star Citizen. And then we also do a lot of events during consumer-driven game shows. So, Gamescom in Germany is a big one for us. This last year, we had 2,000 people come to the event that we ran there. We do it at PAX East. I think we're going to have about 1,200 people at the PAX East that's coming up here. We did it last year. We do stuff at PAX Prime, South by Southwest. We did PAX Australia, where we unveiled the first glimpse of the first-person shooting aspect of Star Citizen. And we do CitizenCon, which is sort of the one-year anniversary of the game itself, where we bring sort of backers together and we sort of do a year in review and sort of tease them and show them stuff that we're going to be doing this coming year. So we really engage one-on-one. I think the community really appreciates that. I mean, it's really actually pretty awesome to meet people one-on-one that have, say, love the stuff that you're doing or have played a game that you've made in the past. And that's something you just traditionally don't get in the normal old-school publishing setup. And that's one of the aspects that I find the most rewarding of what we do. So people travel from all around the globe to meet us. You can actually see this was PAX Australia, and those dots all around there are where everyone came down to Australia to meet us. So obviously quite a lot of people in Australia, but a lot of people from Europe, a lot of people from North America, and even some from South America too, and in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, as you can see. So the other aspect is testing without borders. So I think we all know kind of the problems you get in big, complicated games today, like can't get online at launch, it doesn't feel like there's enough time spent on polishing, there's bugs and glitches that ruin the experience. So, Linux, Firefox, Java, MySQL, all software that focus on constant iteration and open collaborative relationship with its users that create a better experience. So our idea was, as we make this game, since it's going to be a large game and it's going to be very complicated, why don't we share elements of the game with our backers, with the community, and get their feedback and let them hammer on aspects of it so we can make a better, more polished game when we finally are ready to release the full game. So we have a large community of our active backers, it's essentially the largest testing team ever assembled in the games business, I would think. We have hundreds of thousands of people that play our early builds. So even if you're a big publisher and you've got a massive testing department, it's still pretty hard to compete with several 100,000 people banging on your code, making sure all the various configurations and all the aspects that you can sort of, you can test it really well, but then when it suddenly goes public, everything falls apart. And that's kind of, I think we've seen that this past year and maybe the year before. And so I think that's a definite advantage we get. We have an open modular development process, which the community, helps polish and iterate the features as well, which allows us to sort of, I think, advance the game further than I could have done in the old model because we get a feedback loop much sooner, and it's the best focus group you could possibly get because these are people that have loved this kind of game so much they're willing to give you money long before they can play the final game. And so they're definitely pre-qualified to say, yes, is this a fun game or not a fun game? And it helps us on the back end and network side, which is usually one of the problems that you have when you go from testing internally with 50 people or 100 people to suddenly it's being 100,000 or 1 million people playing it. We're actually getting to hit some of those numbers early, so hopefully our load balancing and network stability will be much better when we finally do release the game. We also collect a huge amount of sort of metrics from the people from our user base playing it, so that helps us also make judgments on balance and playability. So, all these things I think are helping us shape ultimately a better game. Last aspect here, we publish without borders. So, we don't have the logistics of selling physical goods. We don't have borders, and we don't have everyone taking a bite out of the apple as we sell it. So, Steam, iTunes, Netflix, they've all trained consumers that digital is more convenient, more flexible, and available instantly no matter where they are. So, why not deliver your game digitally to the consumers and go one step further by going direct, cutting out the middleman? That's kind of what we've been focusing on, and so far, it's been doing pretty well for us. We keep 97 cents of every dollar that's pledged, so we give a little bit away to PayPal or the credit card processor. But we don't have to deal with a publisher's investment. We don't have to deal with foreign distribution deals or sort of loaded manufacturing costs. We also have this power to reach backers all over the world via a whole bunch of new mechanisms that you wouldn't have in the past with the old retail model and everything, via the, sort of the kind of viral marketing and sort of social reach you can get. And that our sort of ship commercials are a good example of, we make these sort of very fun, attractive commercials. One's like a BMW commercial, one's like a parody of Top Gear, and then it sort of gets play on the news sites, and people share it, and then it brings awareness. Some people can see it, and they haven't heard of Star Citizen, and it sort of leads them to us, which is pretty cool. So all of that, allows us to have ambition without borders. And that's how we've raised $72 million so far and counting. It's allowing us to build a game that has unparalleled ambition. It's based on a new IP, which is, for this scale of budget would be fairly unusual, in a genre that most people considered dead, on a platform that everybody wrote off, which was the PC. And I don't think everyone's writing off the PC nowadays. But as I said at the beginning, this $72 million is not the most important number that matters to us. So what numbers do matter? 4,189,616 forum posts. And that's a huge amount of engagement for our community to date. We have 1,767 development updates over 846 days. So that's more than 2 updates a day for over 2 years. I mean, it's our community team and the development team that helps sort of do those. That's a pretty huge achievement. We have 469 videos that we've shared. There's 181 countries represented by the various backers around the world on Star Citizen. We have 26,030 player organizations, and the biggest of which is Imperium, and has over 10,000 members. And the biggest number is 745,819 engaged supporters. So all of this really means, I mean, the message I want to get across is that Star Citizen really is a community, and it's a community without borders. And that's the secret of our success, and the fact that we focus on them from day one is, I think, one of the things that keeps us going, and hopefully will sustain us going forward and help us to build, I hope, the best game I've ever made. So we've shifted the paradigm of funding, development, communication, publishing, and community to better align with today's connected and sharing involved world. And I actually would think that, in this audience, you not necessarily have to make a space game or a PC game or even have it crowdfunded, but a lot of the things that we do on the community aspect and involving and the open development, those are all things that I believe really strongly in. And I think, if more people embraced them, I think they would see an engagement that, maybe they haven't seen before, or an uplift that they haven't seen before, or just, have a sense of reward that they haven't had before. And it's definitely, for me, the way that I think a lot of development will be happening in the future. So I think, you guys can do the same thing, because it takes a community to build a universe. And there you go. That's the end of my very short speech. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Next up, we have a gentleman that has had a bit of a Midas touch in the business, in the industry, even though he hasn't been around for decades. Christian Segerström from Super Evil Megacore has been involved in a number of successful ventures, Playfish, Glue Mobile, his current company that just put out Vainglory. And he's going to look to past pioneers in the industry, kind of look back historically. He says he's not predicting the future, but he's going to make some comments about where he sees things going from his perspective and how his development's impacting the way he sees the future. Christian. Thanks, sir.
Hi there. So this is actually my first DICE. I feel like I've been around for a while, but it is my first DICE. And I've got to say, listening to the presentations this morning, I'm just pretty overwhelmed by the sheer level of craftsmanship, both in terms of building some of the games that I grew up loving, as well as building some of the companies that I admire the most today. And as I grew up myself, I was actually heartbroken by figuring out that finally I was never going to be a good enough coder or good enough at drawing or animating or any of those things to sort of create the form of art that I love. But what I did instead over time was actually to develop a craft, if you like, of my own, mainly derived from the fact that I didn't have too many talents in other areas, which was around building successful game teams and game companies right at the bleeding edge of where the games industry is heading. And I've been very fortunate in that journey, in that the 3 other companies that I was part of building in different roles turned out to really push the boundaries of the industry in one way or another. And the company that I'm working with now, Super Evil Megacorp, we're still at the very early stages of our journey, but it's certainly something that we are hoping to do in terms of core gaming on touchscreens. So my journey started really with Glue Mobile. Back then, my company was called Macrospace. We formed the European half of what became Glue Mobile. That was a feature phones business. I spent 7 years building it from scratch, from nothing, when the first phones came out that could support downloadable content, all the way to an IPO in 2007. I then left in order to create Playfish, one of the true social gaming pioneers that created games on what ended up being Facebook and other social networks, and grew very rapidly from there. And then I spent some time at EA, but I was also very fortunate to be the very first investor into Supercell and spent some time on the board of that company, arguably one of the most successful game companies on any platform today, with 3 of the world's top 10 touchscreen titles, with Clash of Clans, Boom Beach, and Heyday. And after that, I'm today, as I said, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Super Evil Megacorp, creators of Vainglory, the MOBA perfected for touch, and really focused on pushing the boundaries of the games industry by inspiring core gamers to take on touchscreens as their primary gaming platform. So clearly, none of us here make games to make money, but commercial success does matter, because if you create commercial success, that enables you to reinvest in your game, the game that you want to make. And for me, what I've done over the past 15 years is really created a lot of scars, if you like, in my experience. I certainly have learned a lot of painful lessons, made a lot of bad decisions, made some good decisions, but learned a lot across the board. And what I was hoping to share was some of those scars, if you like, some of the things which I think have helped determine which companies ultimately became commercially successful and which didn't, in an environment of massive uncertainty. And by the way, like, I say that I got into the game industry because of the intersection of technology and art, plus an art form that I love and I've played with, since a kid. If you ask my mom, she'll tell you I just played so many games I could never get myself a proper job at all. So that's another route into the game industry. So Glue Mobile, the feature phone games industry. This was a really interesting time in computer games. Our dream was to take games that you would play on a Game Boy or Game Boy Advance and ultimately get those in everyone's pocket, because you know what, when everyone has a mobile device, everyone could own a Game Boy Advance or a Game Boy. So the title you see there on the screen is a title called Ancient Empires 2, a sort of Final Fantasy Tactics or Advanced War style title, the kind of game that I loved to play at the time. But the business was really hard. You had to, on the one hand, create a game that would run on thousands of devices with different screen sizes, memory constraints, ability, processing power, and all that. And you then had to try to distribute those through hundreds of carriers who all were kind of the only people who could sell to their own consumers. Super hard. But this was kind of where I cut my teeth as a game maker. Given that I didn't have the talent to code or to draw, I spent all my time instead thinking about, how do I find the best people in the world who are really passionate about doing this? And then how do I ultimately empower them to go and create the games that they love playing themselves? And that was, to me, a huge thing of thinking about an org structure not as a pyramid of one guy at the top telling everyone else to do, because you know what, that guy was kind of not very talented, but rather, how do you instead think of the org structure the other way around? How do you hire rock stars, and how do you get the kind of senior management in a company to instead focus on building the stage for those rock stars and that lead guitarist and the drummer to perform? So that was important. But at the same time, though, this part of the industry is, I sometimes refer to as the Siberian Gulag, because that's how hard it was. If you knew what it entailed, you would never get into it. And if you survived it, you could survive anything. In fact, the talent that cut their teeth in feature phone gaming in the early 2000s are actually the people today who run companies like Supercell, who are in senior management positions at King.com or at Wooga. Right now, it was just one of those times where it was every cent of profit for you to be able to pay your staff at the end of every month was just really hard. And if you couldn't make great games and distribute them well, you were in trouble. So the first lesson of my 10 lessons was that when the market environment is immature, when the conditions are tough out there, keep your burn rates low. What that means is don't try to spend a minimal amount of money, because it's much better to have a small team tackle a problem for a long time than having a large team that only has a little bit of time to tackle it. So in particular, when you're looking for that aha, that awesome, like what is it that is unique about this medium, this specific new device? People didn't have any preconceived notions of what should gaming feel like on a mobile device. Give yourself time, embrace the medium, give yourself time to embrace it, keep your burn rates low. The winners in this market were exactly the companies that ultimately ended up being very cautious on cost. The second, though, lesson, which is more of a meta lesson, which I think is very, very kind of appropriate for today as we think about things like VR and AR and streaming and all those wonderful things that are happening, new platforms coming into the game industry. It's that compound immaturity in a market slows it down dramatically. What that means is that, or what I mean by this is that if you have a client side, if you like, if you have a set of technologies that are immature, if you have a distribution environment which is immature, and you also have a set of consumer expectations that are immature because no one knows really how that platform is going to work or what to expect from it, that means that things will take a very long time to evolve. I remember back in 2004, when my brethren from a company called Jamdat back then went public, we had just launched one of our really big hits in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire on mobile, sold millions of units. I was convinced that in the next 2 years we will see the first billion-dollar mobile game. That was in 2004. I was literally convinced. We did see the first billion-dollar mobile game, but that was in 9 years later, in 2013. So that's how long these things can take. And today, obviously, the mobile games market is amazing, but it can take a long time. Thirdly, if you really do want to IPO your game business, and I'm not sure that I would recommend that to anyone, but if you really do want to IPO it, make sure that you don't IPO it after your big growth curve without having had any downturns. Make sure you've had a couple of downturns before so that you have some language to talk to the analysts and explain to them how your business has some ups and has some downs. Because it can be pretty heartbreaking when you have your first little down and the analysts tear you to pieces. No matter how much you try to explain it to them beforehand, they just saw a straight line. The other thing, actually, which was more of a humbling personal lesson from this era for me was when I ultimately made the heartbreaking personal decision to leave Glue. I poured my heart and soul into it for 6 years, and I decided, okay, now's the day. I've got to go build something new. That's what I really want to do. And I was a Section 16 officer, as it's called, so you have to put out a press release. So we put out a press release that I am leaving, and I was sort of I wasn't at all totally convinced that that was the right decision. Then what happened was the stock jumped by about 4% out there. And at that point, it was kind of bad, but kind of good, because you know what, I knew at that moment in time that, the market agreed with me, time for me to move on. So, but kind of humbling at the same time. Awesome, but humbling. So my next company that I went on to found from there and became the chief exec was Playfish. Here, our dream was to take what Nintendo had done so awesomely with the Nintendo Wii, of turning the camera around, not focusing on the explosions on screen, but focusing on the interplay between the people playing, and what Facebook has done online, pre-platform, pre-games, any of that stuff, of just bringing communities together. We thought, what if Nintendo and Facebook had a love child? That's the thing we want to build. An amazing an amazing company that creates social games online. Learned a lot through this process. I got to, if you like, learn all the things from building Glue and start again and build a company with a kind of culture and approach to talent that I really wanted to create, which was amazing. We were very lucky. We grew incredibly quickly. We got to pioneer microtransactions in the West that everyone said were never going to work. We got to pioneer stuff like appointment game mechanics, viral distribution mechanics, so many new things. It was like a crazy new world that we got to kind of learn about. And like one of the main lessons for me from all of this stuff was just how important community is. And I really enjoyed that previous talk, because that is true. It is all about the community and working with the community to make your games better. So we grew to over 60 million monthly active users with games like Pet Society, for example, and Who Was the Biggest Brain at the time, which were really focused on bringing those communities together. Lots and lots and lots of lessons from this era, as I said. But one pretty interesting one when you think about the future and what kind of companies might be successful is that one of the things that is kind of, if you look at the winners from this era of games, it turns out there is no publishing leverage in digital games. What do I mean by that? Well, in physical games, clearly there's sort of almost a 50-50 effort of making the title itself and then making sure that everyone can get access to those boxes, whether you're in a shop or like whichever way that between the marketing programs and all those sort of things that you need to do to get the game out. Turns out in digital games, when they're purely digitally distributed, it actually is predominantly about your authentic interaction with your user base. The way that the digital app stores and the digital distribution channels tend to actually be fairly straightforward to manage. So there is effort there, but perhaps it's like 90% in the making the game and understanding that the game itself markets itself more than anything else, and the community interaction of the game is the most important part of marketing. And there is still some of the mechanistic publishing bits, but it's much less important. And it's pretty fundamental. The winners of this era all were content creators. None of them were pure publishers. And I think that says something about what kind of companies are successful also in the future. So, and it also begs the question, does it really make sense to build a publishing organization with multiple studios all around the world? Because if the publishing organization only adds 10% to the studios, is it really worth? And it's interesting. We'll see what kind of companies get built in the future. So, yeah, another small lesson is, just like IPOing is kind of complicated, selling a company is also complicated. We became part of EA in 2009. And it does genuinely, and everyone who's ever sold a company knows this, one dream and one adventure ends, another exciting dream and another exciting adventure does start, but it really is if you like, a complete change in how a company operates. Let's talk about Supercell then for a second. So Supercell really pioneered mid-core gaming on touch and has really gone from strength to strength to strength ever since. And what was interesting about Supercell, and just to be clear, I can take absolutely zero credit for any success that Supercell had, other than having been very fortunate to be at the right time in the right place in order to fund an incredible team and be able to make coffees for them occasionally, and hopefully that's helped them be a little bit better along the way. But what was incredible about Supercell was the realization right from the start that they were always going to be small, that what they were looking for really is to build these cells. It's all in the name, these super cells of incredible talent put together in order to pursue opportunities, and then create a culture around that where failure is okay. In fact, they famously celebrate failure with champagne. Of you can go out and try to do the best possible thing, and you know what, if it doesn't work out, we'll party and we'll do it again, because that's what we're about. So that was pretty amazing. Also, their execution discipline has just been amazing to watch from the outside, and as well as their innovations in marketing and other places. But one of perhaps the most profound takeaway for the future from the Supercell journey has been that talent density matters. It is obvious in computer games, like it is in any form of art, that talent matters. You need the best people to do things. But what I think Supercell showed the world was that it's not enough, if you like. If you have 10 amazing people, it is much better to put them in one team working on one problem, as opposed to get 10 amazing people to recruit 10 different teams working on 10 different problems. In fact, so far so that you could argue that the 100-person company is the new 10,000-person company in games. Because the efficient scale of a gaming company, with both the publishing leverage going away, as well as the level of automation at every level of a game company these days, from hosting to development tools to everything else, the 100-person company can arguably create a better game company than a 10,000-person company. So it's kind of really interesting to see how that will affect the future of the industry as well. So what about super evil megacorp? We are a collection of industry veterans, very much, if you like, learning all those lessons from some of these past journeys. I was originally an investor in Super Evil Megacorp. One of the co-founders used to be I used to work closely with at Playfish, so that's how I knew the crew from the start. But they were this incredible collection of senior industry talent from Riot and Blizzard, Insomniac, and Ready at Dawn, like all these amazing companies that I've admired, that got together and decided that we are going to start creating a franchise for the very long term. How do we bring those really visceral, emotional, exciting gaming experiences that we all grew up with in LAN parties and playing games like Warcraft 3 or Counter-Strike and others? How can we bring those experiences to the touch generation? How can we make sure that people who play on touchscreens aren't always bogged down with timers and energy mechanics? How do they get to have the same experiences we had when we grew up? And how do we take that and build a 10-year plus, 20-plus year franchise out of all of it? And what's been amazing about that journey has been really to sort of be part of that level of talent across the board, to watch them bring a game like Vainglory to life, and to show the kind of experiences that it is that we're ultimately looking to create. I'm going to play a short video that we actually put together around 6 months ago. in order to illustrate the kind of experiences we wanted to bring onto touchscreens. So we announced the game at the Apple keynote back in September when they announced the iPhone 6 and the iPhone 6 Plus, and back when we were able to showcase, if you like, what the metal technology can do on Apple devices. And if you haven't checked it out as developers, you should. It's an amazing API in order to create truly low-level graphics and high performance on touchscreens. We launched ultimately in November, staggered launch throughout the world in different regions at different times to make sure that we could keep up with our server load. And we've just been overwhelmed with the community response across the board. It's just been really amazing, and if you guys are watching on Twitch, thank you. I mean, it's just been amazing to work with all of you guys, and it's been amazing to work with like everyone from the dedicated players from the start who've been giving us loads of feedback, helping us improve the game, working with all the streamers, folks like Shinkagan or Dizzy Live and others, Don John, the Alvaro 845, all these folks who've really taken the game to their hearts and really helped teach their user base about it and all that. And the things that have been really important to us when we sort of look at what have we learned throughout this is that we didn't know. Remember those triplets that I showed earlier, the client-side tech and the distribution tech and the consumer acceptance. Like we sort of knew that the tech was there, the client tech was there, distribution was there, but we didn't know where consumer acceptance would be. And the thing that we've really been taken with is, like in January of just this past January, we had over 250,000 individual people watching our developer stream, for example. And we stream every Friday just to talk about, hey, what's going on with the game, what's coming up next, and play with viewers and all that, which has been amazing. The average player in the game plays more than 75 minutes per day. And that's the average, like including the people who just check the news feed. So we've just been overwhelmed with the very early stages of how our community have been interacting. And I actually run the Twitter account of the game. And like I literally wake up in the morning, first thing I do is respond to some Twitter questions. I respond to Twitter throughout the day and in the evening. And it's just been amazing, the intensity and passion inside the community. It's been great. There's already loads of registered Vainglory teams out there. There's some tournaments being run, which is, again, incredibly, we're super thankful for. And we know we need to build more tech on that front and all that. But gamers are truly ready for touch, which is really, really good. It'll take years and years to build to make it really big, but we're just excited about our start. A couple of final lessons then, maybe meta lessons, call them that. Firstly, be patient with the future. The future will not happen tomorrow. There's loads of compounding maturity all the way out there. But the people who cut their teeth in making when the times are hard will be the people who will rule the world when the times will be easy. Secondly, funding models will evolve. When I started, $50,000 was enough to invest in a single game, and you could invest $500,000 in a company that could make many games. Today, you need $5 million at least in order to pursue some of these opportunities. VCs must begin to think more like publishers and dare to take content risk, not publisher risk of a company that makes many, many, many games. Equally, publishers need to be more comfortable taking equity upside as opposed to controlling the destiny of a company through a revenue share or through some other form of controlling their corporate development. But then finally, and perhaps most importantly of all, if I had listened to people who are experienced stand on stages like this, and I would have always listened to everything that they said, I would never ever have set up any of the companies that I set up. So take all established wisdom, including pretty much everything you've heard in this talk, with a massive bowl of salt. It's the most amazing time in the game industry ever. It is truly borderless. So many vectors of innovation in so many different directions. We are excited about ours and our community, but there are many others. And don't listen to me, go out and build them, because that's the kind of time we live in, which is so exciting. With that, thank you very much.
Well, there's a lot of takeaways from Christian's talk. I think the one I got behind the curtain there was that I want ride-along rights to all his investments. I think that'd be a good thing. Next up is Michael DePlatter from Monolith Productions. I won't say Shadows of Mordor was a surprise, certainly not to those who played it, but might have been a bit of a sleeper early, and it was interesting as time went on. Almost everyone I talked to, and I'd ask, what are you playing? What's your favorite game? Almost universally, they came back to this game and were really, really impressed. And I think the way technically you're able to involve the player and player stories is a really big deal, and particularly with a revered property as such. So Michael's going to share some of those experiences where he thinks those player-type engagements can really help us in game development, and share some of his favorite player stories within the game community he has. So, Michael?